Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess, Thompson, and McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Behind the Book. Karen, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Tess. I've been working on a book I've mentioned before called The House Sitter, and I'm finding it kind of challenging. It's kicking my butt, I guess is what I want to say. What I found is that it's a domestic suspense, and you want some twists and turns, and you want the story to unfold so it reveals things to the reader, but not too much too soon. And this is a really different kind of book for me. I'm really enjoying writing it, but I've got a little bit of self-doubt going on.
Yeah, I understand the mystery that I wrote recently, Blue Twilight, was that way. You've got your red herrings and, how much to reveal. And that one really required a lot more rewriting than I tend to do. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I'm putting different chapters in different people's points of view, and then there's also some flashbacks, and I'm doing something I haven't done before, which is most of the chapters are in third person, and then a few throughout are in first. This is something I've noticed in other books of this genre, and sometimes the first person is not necessarily someone who can be trusted.
Mm.
So I'm having fun with it. I can't help but wonder if I'm in over my head, but I'm going to keep going and work really hard, and hopefully it'll work out, which is sort of how I feel almost every time I write a book.
Yeah. Well, today's guest is Christine Nolfi, and she talks about the doubt and the questioning, and that it's gotten actually worse the more books she's written.
Which is the opposite of what you'd think, right? You'd think that we would, on some level, be like, "Ah, I've got this. I've done it before. I can do it again." But each book is its own unique creation, and it has its own challenges. And if you're a writer who likes to challenge yourself or do something a little different, that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. We really enjoyed this interview with Christine. We both know her personally. I've even stayed at her house one time, and actually I've known her all the way back to about 2012 when we were both just starting out as indie writers. And then I kind of lost track of her, and then we were reacquainted about 3 years ago, I think. And it's been such a joy to get to know her on a whole nother level. And she's just one of these women who is so full of wisdom. I feel like I could just sit there all day and ask her questions about what I should be doing with my life, and she would know all the answers.
I felt the same way, and I loved hearing her talk about the role that physical movement plays with creativity, because I think that there is something scientific to back that up. I'm not really sure, but I've found too that when I'm stuck, going for a walk or anything like that will get your mind moving, and you'll get unstuck. So she confirmed that in a much more articulate way than I'm saying it right now. She was a very fun interview. I think our listeners are going to enjoy hearing everything about her writing life and her family too. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, without any further rambling from us, enjoy Christine Nolfi. Today we have best-selling author and award-winning author Christine Nolfi as our guest. Christine writes heartwarming and inspiring fiction and is the author of the award-winning Sweet Lake series, Sweet Lake, The Comfort of Secrets, and The Season of Silver Linings. A native of Ohio, Christine now resides in South Carolina with her husband, Barry. Welcome, Christine.
Hi, it's great to be here.
We're so excited, and I have to share with our guests this wonderful review you just recently received for your latest novel, A Passing Storm. From Publishers Weekly, they say it's tautly plotted, expertly characterized, and genuinely riveting. Nolfi's emotional tour de force will capture readers' hearts. Well, you can't get better praise than that.
No, I'm thrilled with that review, especially since it's the first review to come from one of the trades.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background. How old were you when you decided you wanted to be a writer?
I think I answer that question the way most career novelists answer. I can't remember a time when I was not writing stories during childhood. And I've spoken to so many other writers, and that seems to be something we had in common is we all began writing about the same time we started reading.
That's certainly true of me. I hear third or fourth grade, a lot of writers say that. I think because that's when you really dig into, fiction that has a little more to it.
Right,
So,
exactly. And it just seems to be automatic that you go from reading to inventing your own stories. By the time I got to high school, I was writing everyone's love letters and writing for the literary magazine for the high school. And then I graduated early and started college faster based on my writing ability.
and then how many books have you written to date?
To date, I've written 14. I hate that question because how many books have we all written? Honestly, 50. I have published 14 of the books I've written. But again, like many novelists, I wrote quite a few books before one was ready for publication. Starting back in college, I wrote my first novel. It was 600 pages. This was before computers. I wrote it on an IBM Selectric, and every time I revised, I had to put another piece of paper in the typewriter, which teaches you to type very quickly.
Well, that sort of answers our next question, but how did you get started writing novels in particular? Like, what was the turning point for you where you were like, yes, it's time now to write that novel?
I can't remember a time in childhood when I didn't have the intention of growing up to be a novelist. I feel like I came into the world with that intention, and it was just a matter of what do I need to do to get there. And so the logical thing for me was find a career that involves writing. So I went into public relations, foolishly thinking that I would have time to write a novel. I was lucky because I almost went into journalism. And when I was at Kent State, a journalist at the Akron Beacon Journal warned me off becoming a journalist because he had wanted to be a novelist. And you get caught in the career track, and he never could find time to write a book. So I thought public relations made more sense. But in reality, I was so busy working for companies that I didn't sit down seriously and start writing books until my mid 30s. And then it wasn't until my mid 40s when my kids were in elementary school and junior high that I thought, either I do this now and really put some effort into it, or I will never publish. I'll just be too old to get started.
That sounds a lot like a lot of writers I know. You spend years thinking about writing and it's there and it's just waiting for you to get the opportunity to do it.
Because it's time consuming. Those first books that you write, and I think debut novelists should keep this in mind because we're so hard on ourselves as professionals. Learning how to write a book is intuitive, and there's no roadmap. You have to learn what works for you. And so most of us have those manuscripts sitting, unloved and dusty in a corner somewhere. And that's how we learned how to tell stories in our way. So it does take time.
Now, I know you have a home office. Do you also write in other places or is that your main area?
When I'm first putting together drafts, I tend to sit at my big Mac computer in my office and I will type it out. But I can't write a novel entirely on a computer. So I have a chaise lounge downstairs in the living room, and I also have a recliner in the TV room. So I tend to move around the house after I have written a first draft of a scene. I don't write the first draft of the entire novel. I'll write a first draft of a scene, and then I prefer to revise longhand. It seems to give me more emotional writing. It's a deeper process. And then I go back and I type in all those revisions, and I go through that process several times with a book. I think I'm more of a reviser than a writer.
That's what writing is
Yeah,
rewriting. Anyone who doesn't know that hasn't spent enough
Hasn't
time
written
at
a book.
their desk. Yeah, exactly. All right, so kind of transitioning into more of your personal life, you have a very modern family. Can you tell us how they inform your writing and creativity?
Well, my four kids are adopted from the Philippines, and I remarried in my early 50s, and so I have two stepchildren also who met me when they were young adults. It's this real hodgepodge of different experiences between uh, mine and my husband and our six kids. They all get along well, but when you have a mixed family as mine is, everybody's not one religion, everybody's not one color, it changes how I view family. I see the people who come into your life and you decide to offer your devotion to, I see that as family. Many of us aren't terribly connected to our biological families. And so that whole notion of what is family, I think it's really the circle of love that you choose to create in your life. And that's reflected in all of my novels. They tend to have a diverse cast. People come from varying backgrounds. And I like to throw all those different experiences together and test the limits of what readers assume.
So out of these 6 kids and your husband and the rest of the extended family, do any of your family members read your books?
I know my sisters do. I have 4 sisters. I know several of my sisters do. My husband absolutely does. And one of my daughters reads some of the books. But ironically enough, no one in my immediate family is an avid reader as I am. And I've never wanted to pressure them to read my books. So I guess the answer is kind of, sort of.
Right. Well, the fact that your sisters do, I think, is huge.
One of my daughters was working in her office in Pittsburgh and was surprised when she was walking through the cafeteria because someone she didn't know that worked at the law firm was reading one of my books. And I think that maybe really informed her decision to pick up one of my books because she saw a stranger reading one.
It was like you were a real author. Yeah.
Wow, Mom's an author.
So tell us, what kind of books do you enjoy reading?
I read across. I don't have one favorite. I guess I prefer literary novels. At the moment, I'm rereading Pachinko, but I try to read across genres. I think as writers, we need to hone our craft by keeping up with how different genres handle story, because there's a huge variety. And to me, the best books learn how to combine, the best from suspense novels and the best from mainstream and the best from romance novels. Each have their own tricks and devices for pulling readers into the story.
Now, I have a question that I know the answer to, I think,
Sure.
but you can tell me which. Do you ever have any doubts about a book, either while you're writing it or after you finish? Or do you feel pretty confident when you get to the end?
Okay, this will sound crazy, but the further along I get in my career, the more self-doubt I have. I don't know, somebody find me a psychiatrist. I don't know if it's because, and you know this because you've written a lot of books. You've had enough readers tell you, oh my gosh, I loved that story. And so maybe part of it is the pressure of you always have to do a little better than the last book. And
Mhm.
so we keep raising that bar. So I don't know, that also increases the self-doubt.
I think that's good too, though, don't you think? Because it keeps you on your toes. You don't get overconfident. You are careful and you write with intention. At least that's how it seems to me.
I need to start calling you in the mornings before I start writing, Karen.
Well, I think it is exactly that. You're always trying to raise your skill level. And when you see a review that says this is the best one so far, you think, oh, well, that's scary because I
Right,
don't know if I can do it again.
right. How do I top that?
Yeah.
But how are we supposed to not let the self-doubt overwhelm us? I don't know how to do that. I haven't figured it out yet. Have
It's
you?
tricky. No, as a matter of fact, this book that just came out last week of mine, I told my husband, I was like, I think this is the worst book I've ever written. And I truly meant that. And the reviews from my street team were like, this is the best one ever. It's just your writing just keeps developing. And I'm thinking, really?
Yeah, exactly.
I
And
don't think we're good judges of our own work.
Definitely not. And I do think as we grow in experience, we expect so much more from ourselves than when we first started. And so that's part of it too.
yeah, we really do. We don't want to disappoint readers, because once you have readers, which is, I have so much gratitude for the fact that anybody sits down and reads one of my books. And so you don't want to disappoint them after knowing that you have delighted them with something you've written in the past.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So if someone is unfamiliar with your books, which one would you suggest they start with?
The Road She Left Behind. It's really, it was really a transition book for me. When I started writing, The first series I wrote, the Liberty series, did very well. I published it independently, and it had a very strong romantic element to it. But as I progressed in my career, I learned from comments from editors that I was really writing closer to mainstream. And then when I finished my second series, the Sweet Lake series, by the time I wrote the final book, The Season of Silver Linings, editors were making the observation that maybe I should try to position myself more in upmarket literature, since I did have a closer to literary writing style, and I was going after meatier topics. And because of my background with my diverse family, and I just was attracted to more meatier subject matter. So once they started urging me in that direction, and I wrote The Road She Left Behind, that seemed to cement with readers that, okay, she's heading in a different direction, and we're going with her. The book that's coming out in November is even more so closer to mainstream. I'm not even sure I'd describe it as women's fiction. It definitely follows a family dynamic, but the book is, I think there are suspense readers and mainstream readers and readers outside of the normal romance and women's fiction genre that the book will appeal to.
I would agree with that, having read it already. The
And thank
Passing
you for
Storm
reading.
is, oh no, it was wonderful. It was a pleasure to read it. So I'm excited for when it comes out. I think readers are going to just love it. Absolutely love it. And I think you're right. I think it will satisfy a broad range of readers as well. And then the fact that Publishers Weekly agreed with me,
Yeah.
I can see that my opinions are good. So
Is it hard, Christine, to wait so long for it to be out in the world?
Yes. In some ways, and again, I think that's the self-doubt, and we're nervous anyway. I think most writers are introverts. It's that performance anxiety, and then there's a delay, and then you're even more nervous. Although at this point, I'm just trying to focus on the book that I'm writing now and not think about it.
that's the best way to go about it, I
Yeah.
think. So how do you know when a book is done? When you're working on a manuscript and you obviously you get to the end, but if you're like a lot of writers, we just endlessly fiddle with it. Is there some point where you feel that it's finished?
When the final editor takes it out of my hands, I could fiddle with a book forever. And I think many of us could, because there's always something that we feel we could improve. At this point, because I've written 5 books in a row for a publishing house, I trust the editorial team that I work with. And because I've had the same team all through, I trust them to tell me when they feel the book is finished, because I think they know that I would keep fiddling forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My agent is the same way. She even now, she's like, okay, you've been working on this new book. Stop perfecting it and just give me the first 3 chapters.
Oh, that's too funny. She knows you so well.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. We've worked together for a while now, and she knows I'm a little bit neurotic. It has to be perfect. But what's perfect to the author and what's perfect to the reader is probably not even in the same hemisphere.
Yeah. So tell us about your writing process. Are you more of an organic writer, or are you a plotter?
I have to have a main story problem in mind before I can begin, and I have to have the plot pretty well figured out. I know the starting points, the heights at the midpoint, how I will end, but I have to leave a lot of room for organic growth. Any book that's cookie cutter created, where somebody can actually knock out chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. If you can do all of that before you've begun writing, you aren't allowing your subconscious to really create. And our best writing, I think, is when we are not in front of a computer screen. And then we have those, you know what that's like. You're suddenly writing dialogue, and one of the characters takes the book hostage, and you're just sitting there laughing as the dialogue flows out. Well, that's your subconscious bearing fruit for the book. And we have to leave room for that.
So when you were coming up with the idea for The Passing Storm, which is the one that's coming out in November, what was the impetus for that? What was the inspiration? Was it one thing? Was it many things?
It was one thing. I asked myself, what would happen if you were forced to care for someone you despised? What happens? What happens if a character must help someone they are certain that they despise? And the book grew from that notion. Because the main character, Ray, she ends up taking in this young man and helping him. And It was a hard book to plot because there was so much diversion. I kept diverting the reader from understanding what was actually going on.
Hmm.
And it went through, oh my gosh, the book probably went through 7 revisions. 4 that I did before I ever delivered it to Lake Union, and then 3 I did with my editor to keep the reader's eye off the ball so that when you get into the end of the book and you really understand the relationship between these 2 characters, you're like, oh, I never saw that coming.
So typically
Interesting.
you wouldn't do that many revisions.
Uh, yeah, I probably typically would, but these were more difficult because I had more herrings in this book. It took a little longer. I had to ask for longer during the editing stage for the first developmental edit because I knew I had to get each of these scenes just right.
So, what parts of writing fiction are the easiest for you, and what are the hardest?
Oh, hardest first. The first 50 pages, because you're really setting who these people are in your mind and they have to become real. I always struggle with the opening of a book. And then once I know who the people are, it gets easier from there. The second half of a book sometimes feels like it writes itself. And that always tells me then I set everything up properly if I really am just in that flow for the second half.
I would agree with you. I always call that laying tracks in the
Yeah,
beginning.
right.
Yeah, because it seems like that's what you're doing. It's a little more arduous, and then every step of the way it gets better, I think.
Do you ever feel that
Yeah.
you have to pull up the tracks and lay
Yeah,
down ones?
I've had that happen.
Yes.
You too, Tess?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I had an aha this morning as I was writing. I'm about a third into this new book, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. I know what this is." So, of course, it will require quite a bit of rewriting of the first chapters, which annoys me, but I do it almost every time.
But that's allowing your subconscious to write the book. And I think that we end up with better books if we allow that process to occur.
Do you have a ideal reader that you have in mind as you're writing? Like they say Stephen King writes for his wife.
I really don't. Maybe I should by now. I guess I assume that the average reader is a woman, although now I'm trying to veer more to where men or women would read my books. But I've never really had an ideal reader. Do you have one?
I always say I write for myself. And if I enjoy it, I hope other people do too. But
That's pretty much me too.
do you?
Yeah.
Right. And if you enjoy it, then everyone else will too.
I hope so. That's my hope
Yeah.
anyway.
So you've answered this a little bit already, but what advice do you have for aspiring writers?
You have to, and it's difficult to find time to write, but any writing habit you can implement, even if it's 10 minutes in the morning before you get ready for work or 10 minutes after you put the kids in bed, just giving yourself that habit begins to tell you that it's worth it, that you're worth it, and that there is a story I can tell. I think a lot of writers think that somehow we just pull these books out very quickly, that it's an easy process. We all struggle to tell a story. And for beginning authors, the hardest part is to not criticize whatever you've put on paper. Don't go back the way we tend to do after we've written a lot of novels and revise chapter by chapter. Don't do that. Just write that first draft and then go back. Because when you're really in the flow of telling a story, you have turned off your internal editor and you are creating at a deeper level. But that's a process you have to teach yourself. So when you begin, first book, just write it and then go back and allow your internal editor to turn on and then look at what you wrote. Give yourself permission to just write.
I wish I had heard you say that back when I was starting out. That is really excellent advice. And on those days when you're not feeling the muse, what helps get you started?
Exercise. Even in my 60s, I am a gym rat, and we tend to live in our heads because we write books and these are the type of people we are. But our physical bodies, you have to have that balance between your intellect and your physical body. And we tend to lose that because we get so obsessed with whatever story we're telling. So if I'm not in the mood to write, I go to the gym. I go practice yoga. I go walk on the beach. I do something physical that gets me out of my intellect. And I think that's something we all need to do if we're practicing a craft like storytelling.
It's almost like it shakes something loose, don't you think?
It does. It does. Because sometimes when we feel so exhausted because we've been sitting writing for hours, the truth is our physical bodies need movement. So you get that spiritual balance back, and then you find you can create again.
Oh, yeah. I can't tell you guys how many plot problems I've figured out during Zumba. They'll just pop
Exactly.
in my head. It's the weirdest thing. Or walking on the beach is another great one.
Exactly. It's getting away from it and allowing yourself to relax and just enjoy being alive. And then boom, those ideas pop up. I used to swim
What's
laps and I'd have to keep a notepad next to the pool because I knew by the time I got to the third or fourth lap, dialogue or some story problem was going to suddenly occur and I'd have to jump out of the water and write it down.
what's the most gratifying part of being an author?
Oh, geez. I think when I hear from readers, this happened a lot with The Road She Left Behind. The book deals with a protein disorder, and one of the characters is close to death. And I received notes from some readers who had a family member who had experienced this, and they said that I depicted it honestly and that they were really pleased with it. That meant a lot to me. And then years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, out of the blue, a reader contacted me and said that she had a friend who was dying, and it was her last week and she wanted something to read. So she gave her all of the Liberty books. So I thought, if I gave somebody joy on their way out, what is better than that?
That is wonderful.
Yes, it really is. So, and I think we all feel this way. We're just so grateful to have readers and to have the chance to share emotion with people we will never meet. It's a gift.
Who is your biggest supporter in your career and your writing?
Oh my gosh, my husband. Every time I say, like Tess talking to her husband, this is the worst thing I've ever written, and God bless these men. They look at you like, yeah, honey, you'll get over this.
It's so true.
I've had Greg say, "You always say this with every book." And I don't recall saying it. I'll hit a
Exactly.
sticking point and I'm like, I don't think this is going to work out. And yeah, he's
And
got
he's like, honey, it's your process.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Cliff's a math person, so he's been able to track it by word count. It's like about 40,000 words in.
He knows what your mood will be. God bless these men.
Yes. All right, let's see here. What is something negative that someone said to you that made you want to succeed even more?
I don't know if anybody has really said anything negative to me, but in the negativity department, one of the authors that we all three know, she's a lovely woman. A couple years ago, she gave me the advice after I had a run-in with another author. She said, every time you get a little further along in this career, there will be someone who tries to knock you down. And I was so upset about that for weeks, but I really took it to heart that we should be very grateful we have these careers and we should be grateful for the readers, but we can't control how other authors may feel if we do experience success. And all we can do is try to send good thoughts out to them. I guess that's the most negative thing that I've experienced.
So what is it that you're hoping that readers will take from your fiction? What is your why?
We live in a very hectic, numbing world. And over and above everything, I want to give readers a deep emotional experience that is hopeful in the end. Because I think life is worth living. We are all valuable. And I on every page, I want to ensure that I give a lot of emotion to the reader, because that's why we read. We want to feel what somebody else feels. That's my why.
Love it. How has your writing style morphed over the years?
Oh, it's definitely more complex now. And now I'm trying to tone down the complexity because I think that it's easier to tell a story in a simpler fashion. So I'm trying to work against my own love of complexity. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does actually. That's really interesting.
Would you say your fiction has become a little edgier as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And a lot of times I'm trying to force some readers to consider a situation in a way they wouldn't want to consider it. And sometimes I want to discuss difficult topics that we all tend to not want to discuss. So I think I'm getting edgier. I'm just trying to do it in a very compassionate way so that I don't turn off readers.
Yeah, and within the context of a story, I think that's a really great thing to broach a more serious topic like that. Now, here's a question I'm just going to throw in. Can you share something about yourself that not many people know or would be surprised to hear about you?
Wow. That would be, well, I come from a very large family. I
How many kids?
there are 6 of us, and Barry has 2 siblings, and then we have the 6 kids, and I must have 40 plus nieces and nephews. And I think
Wow.
the reason there's such a variety of characters in my books is I come from a world with a lot of characters. I guess that I'm such an addictive reader. Maybe I don't know if all writers are as obsessed about reading. I'd love to take a couple years off just to read and not write. But you know how that is. Then you get the next story idea and you're off to the races.
That's right. You have to follow it, see
Yeah.
where it goes.
Right, right.
What are you working on right now?
Another mainstream novel that's similar to The Passing Storm. It's more upmarket lit. I'm only about 50 pages in. I'm not sure yet if Lake Union wants the project, but they seem interested. At this point, I just want to get a little further in to make sure that I know what I'm writing before I pitch it to them. My agent is very excited. She thinks it's a lovely book.
She's been right?
She's been right so far, so I trust her.
Well, now at this part in our podcast, we have some fun extra questions to ask, and I'm going to ask them kind of rapid fire and just blurt out whatever comes to mind.
Sure.
Okay. What is one food that will never get past your lips?
Brains.
Oh, yeah, I'd agree with that one.
Yee.
Tess is nodding. She doesn't want to have brains either.
It reminds me of the scene in Silence of the Lambs when he's, never mind.
Speaking of movies, who would you want to play you in a movie?
I have no idea. Who would want to play me in a movie? Some crazy Italian with wild hair?
No, somebody with the most beautiful skin that's ever walked the face of the earth.
And
Because that's what Christine has. Yeah.
and very white, straight teeth.
Yes.
I was complimenting her on that before we started the interview. I'm like, what's the deal with your teeth? And she was like, nothing. Like, well,
I like them.
I want her teeth. So what superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Healing, ability to heal, physical and emotional.
At the end of your life, what do you hope you'll have accomplished?
I hope I will have improved more situations than I hurt.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
Working in a jewelry department of a department store during the Christmas season. People were so mean.
Retail is tough.
It was tough.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Human behavior. I think most of us, if we hadn't become novelists, probably would have become psychologists. I'll bet.
Yeah, that's a good one. What's your favorite scent?
Oh, geez. Maybe lavender. Maybe rosemary. I guess rosemary. Do I have to have one? Can I have 10?
You can have more than one. You can have as many as you want here on Behind the
Honeysuckle?
Book. Did you say honeysuckle?
Honeysuckle. The
That's a good
gardenias
one.
are blooming in my backyard. They smell lovely right now.
Oh, between you mentioning the beach and the gardenias, I want to be there right now. I'm in Wisconsin. What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Submit my first novel to an agent.
And when people pronounce words incorrectly, do you let them know?
No, because I mispronounce so many words. I now use that Google app that will pronounce for me.
That's because we all have reading
Mhm.
vocabularies.
Right. We were reading so many books as kids. We weren't out interacting. So we never, our dialogue skills just suck. So yeah, I use that Google app now.
The first time I heard facetious and realized it was the same as the written word, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
Me too. That definitely that one and so many others. I've
Right.
heard that. Actually, Grace Green said that in our interview with her, that it's a known thing that children who read a lot often grow up to mispronounce words because we've never heard them said. We've only read them.
Oh, so that's why we do this. That makes perfect sense.
Right?
That's the
Yeah.
correlation right there.
Mhm.
And I have one last question for you, Christine. If you could live your life over again, would you want to?
Yes.
Hmm.
I think for all the pain that we go through, it's worth it for the joy.
Oh, that's a nice note to end the interview on. Well, thank you for joining us today, Christine. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an honor. And I love you
We-
both.
We are so thrilled that you were able to fit this into your busy schedule. And we will look forward to sharing this with our listeners.
I can't wait to hear it. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comments section. This has been Behind the Book.